Teachers of Reddit, what was the best lateness excuse you ever heard? When I was in college, a kid showed up nearly an hour late to our final exam. His excuse, I was in jail until about 25 minutes ago. Just heard this one last week. I'm sorry I was late, I have diarrhea. Truth or lie, you have to respect bathroom problems. Not a teacher, but a kid in class walked in late to my English class in 8th grade. My teacher was really weird, and would go on these rants about how space doesn't exist, reality is a figment of our imagination, and one person at Google is taking over the world by deciding what the results Google gives you are. This kid walks in and says I'm not late because time doesn't exist. He wasn't marked late. Primary teacher here, teaching 11-year-olds, kid comes in 30 minutes late because he was waiting for his LED shoes to finish charging. Turns out he was not lying and proceed to moonwalk over to his chair with his shoes flashing. Couldn't even be mad, it was too cool, stupid at the same time. One of my teachers told that a girl came in late and claimed there had been a bomb attack next door to her home and that the road was blocked. We live in Finland, so the story was an obvious lie. Except it wasn't, there had been a bomb at the police station next to her home, the only of its kind in decades. I was a TA, running twice weekly lab sessions in the evening. Being more than 10 minutes late to a lab usually earned a 0 grade for the day, so you usually needed a medical note or police report to get out of it. At the end of class, one student who was 20 minutes late came up to me and apologized profusely. He was a quiet, unassuming Chinese guy with glasses and a below-average grasp on the English language. He told me that while he was walking to class, a guy in front of him was shot multiple times by a man in a nearby parked car, which then sped off. He claimed that he rushed over to the man, and attempted to attend to his wounds along with another bystander, but that he died before the ambulances arrived. My first thought was, that's ridiculous. But then I noticed his shirt, jeans, and forearms covered in blood. Before I had a chance to really say anything, he beelines it to the exit and leaves. A couple hours later, out of curiosity, I googled Toronto shooting death and sure enough, there's a 14-minute-old article describing a fatal shooting that occurred earlier in the day, not terribly far from campus. The next day, I get an email from the course instructor, informing me that the student had submitted a police report to confirm his involvement in the incident. Motherfucker held a man in his arms as he died and still made the effort to come to class. I can't even imagine what that guy was going through, as he quietly sat in the back of that room. I would give a fellow student a ride to school every day in high school, and he was never awake when I pulled up to his house to pick him up. I felt bad that I was writing his name as my excuse for being late every day, and didn't want to embarrass him. I eventually resorted to absurd excuses that the office and principal seemed to understand as code for it being this kid's fault. Most of my excuses were something along the lines of UFO attack, grandma got ran over by a reindeer, Bigfoot sighting, car was taken and had to wait for Liam Neeson to bring it back. Whatever I thought was funny each morning. Kid had a tough home life and principal agreed if I could get him to school every day it was okay if I was late. Not me, but a teacher I knew. Had a high school freshman that was late because he forgot he had high school and went to his middle school. Kid actually sat in a class before realizing he was at the wrong school. He had the visitor's pass his middle school gave him as proof. Teacher kept the middle school visitor's pass as proof of that lateness story. I was the student. My boyfriend, now husband, and his dad had a collection of classic cars. Mustangs, Comets, Falcons. We drove a different one pretty much every day. They were in various stages of rebuild and had some kinks to work out. I came in half an hour late, covered in grease and sweat and had to explain, the car caught on fire. Don't ask me how, you can talk to him because he was completely unfazed as flames shot out of the top of the freaking motor. We pushed it from the red light. About that time another student came in, fac? What class is, boyfriend, in? His car is on fire in the parking lot. I work in South Korea and had a 5th grader say he was late because he caught a whale, which is a local euphemism for getting circumcised. Not sure if this applies, but a teacher was telling us about how important it was to hand in our essays until the end of the week. We had to hand 2 essays per week. While she was talking about how she wouldn't accept tardiness, there was this only one exception when she accepted it on the following week. Turns out a student was mugged on his way to school. He ended up losing his backpack with everything inside, including the essays, phone, wallet, socks and shoes. The student ended up going to talk to the teacher barefoot and crying, telling her how he tried even to persuade the assailant to let him get the essays out of his backpack, but to no avail. In high school, two girls asked to go to the bathroom at the beginning of drama class, which is a 45 minutes class. The teacher let them go. They came back with 5 minutes left in class, holding McDonald's bags. The teacher cocked an eyebrow and asked what took them so long. One girl sighed and said there was just a really long line for the bathroom. Not a teacher, but my senior year of high school, I drove home on my lunch period because I left my homework on my desk as home. Halfway home, the elderly man in front of me veered off the road and drove into a telephone pole. I stopped to make sure he was okay and for police to show up. He wanted me to help push his car off to the side of the road, but couldn't understand that his axle was snapped in two and buried about 4 inches into the pavement. I overheard the conversation with the police and he was definitely on some medication and should not have been driving. My teacher was cool about it and actually let me grab lunch from the cafeteria and eat in class too, since I was going to grab lunch on the way back, but couldn't. I used this one as a kid. My dad ate my homework. In 7th grade for French class, I had to make a homemade French dish. I chose croissants as I was 12 and anything else would have been way too complicated. I made them with my mom after dinner and sometime after I went to bed. My dad ate like 6 of them, which meant I didn't have enough for the class. So on the way to school, I had to stop at Dunkin' Donuts and replace the ones my dad ate. Me, walks in an hour late when there was already a 90-minute delay for snow. Teacher, how can you be this late? Me, well you see, my garage door was literally frozen shut this morning, so I just kinda went back to sleep to give it time to thaw. Teacher, well alright then. I remember this from 11th grade. Our history class was right after lunch. The class started with a quiz, so everyone was quiet. This big guy comes in like 15 minutes late. He goes over to our male teacher and whispers something in his ear. The teacher repeats it, but a little bit louder so that it was audible. And the teacher says, "The cafeteria lady sold you an all-bread stromboli?" Yes, the cafeteria lady had indeed sold him an all-bread stromboli, with no meat and cheese in it. So he had to go back and ask for another one, sit down and eat it, which was why he was late for class. Not a teacher, but once my classmate wrote my pigeon laid an egg as an excuse on his late coming slip. Not a teacher, but this is one of my favorite stories to tell from freshman year of high school. Some kid showed up really late to class and told our teacher that he was in the bathroom and the trash can was on fire. We all sat there in disbelief and we all went to look out the door to see a bunch of smoke in the hallway. Then we see a security guard run out of the bathroom with a smoking trash can in his hands. Turns out some genius was smoking in the bathroom and threw their cigarette in a trash can full of flammable objects. Still was a pretty funny situation though. Student walked in and looked a bit shaken. She told the class she had been hit by a car in a calm voice. English was her second language. Some people were confused and didn't think she had been a pedestrian struck by a vehicle. Not 5 minutes later, a police officer, paramedics, and the school nurse come in and usher her away. Apparently she got hit, got up off the ground and sprinted into school. She had a minor concussion and we didn't see her for a week or so. One of my kids was absent for a couple of days because he said he missed the bus because he woke up late and his parents were already at work, so he sat outside of his locked apartment complex without a key to get back in. It was snowing. This kid doesn't have heavy, warm winter clothes. That was my first year of teaching in an inner-city public school. The heartbreak doesn't stop. I had another kid who frequently didn't show up because my mom is lazy. She doesn't feel like getting up in time, so I sleep late and miss the bus, so we stay home. I've also gotten worse ones, like it turned out the kid had missed school or been late because he was being punished by getting locked in the basement with the lights off. Or another student who was late because her abusive dad, abusive to mom, was trying to make up to the kids by taking them to buy toys instead of driving them to school. We have a door-to-door bus service for each kid, but sometimes the bus misses kids, especially at the beginning of the year. And because parents work early and might lock the door after the kid is already sitting outside waiting, the kid just sits around all day. Alone. While my dad was teaching one day, a student came in at 10:30 instead of 8:45 when school started. When my dad asked why the student was so late, they replied the liquor store didn't open until 10. My dad teaches 10-year-olds, so this excuse made almost no sense until my dad looked over to his desk and saw the big bottle of Bailey's sitting there with a bow on it. The student's parent was a family friend and wanted to give my dad a gift. Not a teacher, but in the 3rd grade I had to give a presentation in social studies class. We got to read our presentations off of a piece of paper. My dog ate half of that paper the morning I was supposed to deliver said presentation. I was hysterical because I didn't think my teacher would believe the "my dog ate my homework" excuse. My dad wrote a note for my teacher, "Please excuse," as her dog really did eat her homework. Guy in my brother's class lived directly across from the high school. It took less than 1 minute to get to school. He overslept one day and dashed into homeroom. The teacher asked why he was late. Before he could answer, the class starts chanting his bus was late. Teacher said, "Oh, okay." A girl in the year below used the excuse that both her parents just died. The teacher looked on in shock as the girl got out her stuff. 2 days later she got a message from the receptionist saying her mom was here to pick her up. The same teacher from before started going on about how it was evil to use that excuse. The girl looked at him and just said never said they stayed dead. Turns out that they were in a car wreck and both of them had their hearts not beating for 2 minutes each. They were fine after a few weeks. I teach preschool, so most of our excuses are detailed explanations of their bowel movements. A freshman girl with a junior brother was late. She said her brother was taking forever in the shower in the morning. "I can't figure out why it takes him so long. He has short hair. What is he doing in there? He does this all the time?" Office staff was cracking up when she left. Had a classmate bring in her fender once. The professor just nodded and continued class without comment. Edit: a fender is part of your car, often heard in the term fender bender to describe a mild car accident. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I had a friend who was late to first period Spanish class every day of senior year. One day, the teacher had enough and told him he was going to be marked as absent if he was late again. Lo and behold, he's abnormally late the next day, but almost kicks down the door with how excited he is about his excuse. He was rear-ended just outside of the school, by the math teacher, who only hit my friend's car because he himself was rear-ended. By another student at the same school. And if that situation wasn't enough, while the 3 drivers were exchanging info, someone waltzed up to the cars, hopped in the backmost one, and took off with it down the street. Needless to say, my friend wasn't marked absent that day. One of the male final year students in my college was so desperate to get a doctor's note for a missing exam, he got one from a gynecologist. I heard this from one of my lecturers. They were quite perplexed. My brother told the teacher a man with a gun ran into the road and stopped his car, making him late. It was a cop directing traffic. Oh my time to shine for once. Last year I had an early class with very unmotivated students. So many of them were late that instead of letting them enter quietly, the new rule was tell me your excuse and if it's reasonable I'll let you in, never refuse someone. It was just to reduce the problem. So this one time our students arrived like 40 minutes late and pulls me aside and then he says I'm not gonna lie, I was home ready to leave and then my girlfriend asked me to come by her place after class so I had to shave before leaving. Me, to shave? Him, staring awkwardly below his waist, well you know, to keep it clean down there. I teach at a university, but this was from my high school years. My sister had just gotten her learner's permit that week, and was driving to school for the first time, with me riding shotgun, required licensed 18-year family member etc. We came up to a very sharp intersection, something like a 135-degree hairpin turn, and the light turned yellow. My sister asked me what to do, and I said to stop for it, not liking the odds of a complete noob driver trying to do that turn at speed with me on the outside. She stopped, quickly. The Mercedes behind us didn't. Everyone except the Mercedes was okay, but it snarled traffic up pretty badly for a while. I drove the rest of the way to school. The crash totaled the Mercedes, but just dented the back cargo door in the Blazer we were in, and waited in line as student after student checked in late at the office with there was an accident on the way to school. Our excuse was we were the accident on the way to school. I knew a guy in high school who came in 40 minutes late after lunch and said sorry I was at Subway and they got my sandwich wrong. There's one Subway in our school town and it was about 30 minutes away at the other end of the high street. He was already 10 minutes late by the time he started walking back. Not teacher, but student, kid that was always facking around rolled into class 30 minutes late totally disheveled. With wild eyes he claimed he fell down the stairs and blacked out. Teacher didn't believe him but that facker was covered in dust all over his back so who knows. One that I used to use that no teacher ever argued against, was a bloody nose. Prick your finger and let a couple drops onto some toilet paper or tissue. Dab your nose as you're explaining your lateness. I was in college and had this absolute dick of a professor for Renaissance Lit. For example, first class, and he goes off on me for walking in with a hat on. My response was, well, no one else minds, how was I possibly supposed to know I shouldn't wear it unless I'm psychic? I haven't been in this class before. My stepmom died that semester. I missed a week of class. Get back to class, and he goes off again about how disrespectful people are. Asks me why I missed class. My stepmom died last Monday. Dead silent room. Guy asked me to bring in a copy of her obit for proof. He was an absolute sack of shit garbage person. I wasn't the teacher, but I was a member of a national youth choir some years ago, ages 17 to 30. This choir ran week-long summer rehearsals and would perform 2 to 3 times a year. Everyone would be staying in a youth hostel in a city, and we would rehearse in the music department of the local university. On the first morning at the first bass section rehearsals, we were all just starting, and about 10 minutes in, one of the older members, late 20s, walked in. He walked up to the guy running the rehearsal and whispered to him for about a minute and then sat down. The teacher, still laughing, said that was the best excuse for being late he had ever heard but wouldn't share. After rehearsals, we found out that the guy who was late was, in real life, actually a cop. He had popped into a record store to kill time before rehearsals and came across 2 lads trying to leg it with a bunch nicked of CDs. He got in their way and managed to stop both of them and had to wait for the on-duty lads to arrive to hand them off. He was a bit of a legend for the week after that.